Janice, Bloomberg Business Week, they heralded you as one of the world's most influential headhunters.
I was known as the closer. I could close the deal of people. It's really focusing on the solution, not just filling a box. People, they have to own their pathway to the boardroom, but you have to confront your fears and what's the worst that can happen. And that really got me then into the financial world and understanding what Wall Street was all about. What is their legacy going to be? How do you want to be remembered?
In this episode of the SuperPower Podcast, I'm joined by the trailblazing Janice Ellig, a visionary leader in executive search and the CEO of Ellig Group. Janice partners with CEOs, boards, and C-suite executives to identify and place exceptional top-tier talent that aligns with organizational strategy, culture, and purpose. With a rich background in human resources, marketing, and executive recruitment, she brings a wealth of experience to every collaboration. Recognized as one of the world's most influential headhunters by Bloomberg Business Week, Janice is passionate about fostering diversity in leadership, particularly within boardrooms and C-suites. As a published author and sought-after speaker, her expertise has been featured in Forbes, the Financial Times, Directors and Boards, and much more. Beyond her professional success, Janice is deeply committed to philanthropy, serving on numerous non-profit boards, and has received multiple accolades for her outstanding contributions to both corporate and civic leadership. Join us as we dive into Janice's inspiring journey and the incredible impact she's making in the world of executive leadership and business. Janice, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
No, of course, so good to have you on here today. And you're somebody I've looked up to and learned so much from the last few years. So I can't wait to dig a little bit more into your life personally and professionally today. Now, before we started the show, we looked at the graph of life, just a little snapshot through Janice's life. How is that exercise for you looking back on life? Is that something you do often?
Not too often. I think it's good to reflect, though, and it really did take you back to early days. So I enjoyed it, actually. Yeah.
And I suppose going back, all the way back then, let's look at that earliest childhood memory. What is that in your mind? What do you remember?
Oh, I was independent even then.
Really?
Yeah.
What was happening?
I was walking around. At the time, we lived in New York City and actually the Bronx. And I was born in New York. And then we lived in the Bronx for a while. And I left the home. I went around the block and the policeman brought me home. It was a nice little community. So I sort of wanted to go down to the bakery and get some cookies. Yeah, so nice. I did it.
Good choice. And so talk to me a little bit about life growing up then. So what was life like at home? And your heritage is Italian, if I'm not wrong, as well.
Right. In fact, about 2 years ago, I visited where my mother was born. And she came to this country at 11 years of age. And so my father was from Massachusetts. But so it's wonderful to see where your grandparents lived. It was the Alps, actually, of Italy. So, yeah, northern Italy, Belfort. But growing up was, we didn't come from money. But my parents worked very hard. And they knew that education, because they didn't have it, was very important for their 3 girls. So that's what they worked for. And, it was a very loving family. But it was not easy in terms of my mother really knew the value of a dollar and stretched the dollar, so she would say. I don't think I do that as much today. I kind of spend more than I should, but so it was really a loving family.
And growing up, you mentioned there you're one of 3. You had 2 older sisters. And I know at times in previous podcasts you've said that because of a bit of an age gap, you felt like an only child at times. Why was that?
So the older sister was 11 years older than me, and the other was 7. So basically, they were out of the house when I was, 10, and I grew up with my parents, and they were both working, so I would take care of myself. I felt like an only child, but my sisters are very important and always have been in my life. So that close knit, feeling back then really carried into adulthood, being close to women and promoting women.
And we'll come back to your sisters later because I know you've done a lot of work in their name in recent years as well. But just going to your mum a little bit, because you've said in the past, I know your mum gave you 3 life lessons. One, I think it was to love what you do and have purpose. The second one was to be financially independent, right? And the third one,
stay close to your sisters.
Stay close to your sisters.
Yeah,
Tell me about those lessons.
I was 10 when she said that to me. And when you're 10 years of age and you hear this, be financially independent, love what you do, and stay close to your sisters, it stays with you, the 3 things. It's like speaking to anybody, they always remember 3 things. So I remember those. And I say that to a lot of women in my speeches and to men as well, to have choices in life. And that's what she was saying to me, to have choices, to really understand your worth, love what you're doing, and when having those choices, but making sure that you were giving back to your sisters, and taking them along on your own journey. So it stays with me, yeah.
And what was the mindset like of a young Janice then? So this happens at the age of 10. I mentioned then the visualization we did, becoming a teenager, 13, 14. What was Janice like as a teenager?
I didn't make the cheerleading squad because I was too tall, but I was on the hockey team. So I was actually quite involved with sports. And I don't know that I was really as directed as I should have been. The 2 older sisters went to college, but I don't know that I was really college bound as much until the 2 of them really came back and said, this, you must do that. And so I did. Yeah.
And so off you go to college, and talk to me a little bit about that. What was the college experience like for you?
Well, so I was going to go to a New York City school, or Ithaca, Cornell. I was on the waiting list. So I wasn't the best student in high school. I was okay, but I wasn't the best. But I went then to the University of Iowa following the second sister, who had gone to a girls' school 2 years, then went to Iowa, and they accepted all of her credits. And so I followed her there and loved it because it was a Big Ten school, and joined a sorority, Chi Omega. And I really found myself. And I found myself with a lot of new friends, new part of the country, being in the Midwest, very different from New York City or Westchester County, where I was raised. So this is, another piece of me that really grew being in the Midwest. Because in the Midwest, they're not as direct. They agree with you, but they don't always follow what you're saying. So it's Minnesota nice is what we call it. Yeah.
And so you go through college, and then as you looked ahead to your career, I suppose, where did you go into then? What was your passion, your vision? Going back to your mum's first point, love what you do and have purpose.
Again, I didn't have a real vision. In fact, in college, I was going to be in the medical area.
Oh, really?
But I couldn't pith a frog, in zoology. So I said, I don't want to have anybody suffer because of my ineptness in the medical area. So I went into the business school and majored in marketing and economics. And I knew I would then follow something in business. But the middle sister, Adrian, went into healthcare and was a hospital administrator. So I then went into the healthcare area at a medical center, but then switched after that.
And as you start your career, and I know you've worked at companies like Pfizer, Citibank. I guess is that the connection then in the pharma world from what you were just saying, and then you transitioned into more financial services?
Well, I was in a medical center in beautiful downtown Camden, New Jersey. I was head of admissions, and they promoted me to be head of HR because a union was on the scene. I didn't know anything about human resources, but I learned it very quickly, and we defeated a union campaign which was going on, and I testified before the National Labor Relations Board. So I got a lot of great experience in working with consultants. And so from there, I went to Pfizer, which was connected, But Pfizer was a company that was much more layered, and I was used to being number one. I reported to the board at the medical center. I led HR. I reported to the CEO. And so being layered at Pfizer in one of the divisions was not my cup of tea. And I knew that I liked being number one.
Okay.
So I went to Citibank. And Citibank, I was in the card products group and then the insurance group. And I reported to the CEO, and I helped take the company public. And that really got me then into the financial world and understanding what Wall Street was all about. And from there, I continued for about another decade with this company that we took public.
Well, and you mentioned that, obviously, I go back to you wandering to the bakery as a young child, being fiercely independent, and then always wanting to be number one. Where does that come from, do you think, this always wanting to be number one? Is that from your parents? Is that from upbringing?
Well, when you feel like you're an only child and you're fending for yourself in many ways, you like to be in charge. And so it was more about being in charge and having the ability to make change and make decisions without being layered. So I don't think I knew that early on. I think it came later, and it came much later when I realized, in business and taking the company public and working again with the board and the CEO, that's where I wanted to be. And at that time, too, I co-authored a book, What Every Successful Woman Knows. And it was about, getting into the corporation, the ladder, moving up. And so that told me I needed to say this to other women as well. I co-authored with a male colleague, though. It was great.
And throughout your career then, and go back to the earlier years perhaps, because you've done so much great work that we're going to get into a little bit later of today for underrepresented groups on boards and C-suite. But was there a personal moment or a pivotal moment in your career that made you think, I've got to stand up and do more, whether for women or other groups? Did something happen in your own life that made you want to make a stance?
Mm-hmm. I think being at Pfizer Corporation made me realize that being layered for me was not good. And then speaking to a lot of my friends in corporations, women mainly, that they weren't making the difference. They might have had the title, they might have had the money, even the salary, but they weren't there as decision makers. And so for me, it was Wall Street had to change. And there were a lot of not such nice things going on in Wall Street too. So yeah, it was that layering.
And for many people, they might think, wow, that's a huge task. How can I change Wall Street? You saw it differently. Obviously, then we go back to this, the fire, independence, Janice, got to be number one. I've got to drive change. What was the first step that you took? So you're noticing this, other women are experiencing the same thing. What steps did you take? Because actions speak louder than words. What did you do about it?
One of it was writing the book.
Yeah.
And speaking to women, interviewing women. Because my friend, Bill Morin, who had been chairman of Drake, Beam & Morin, an outplacement firm, had written 15 books. He knew exactly how to write a book. I did not. So I said, Bill, how would you like to write a book with me about women on Wall Street and women moving ahead? And he said, oh, that's a great idea. So co-authoring is not easy. So I said, Bill, let me take the lead and you can edit more of it, But that was really the impetus, was really saying, I have to have a voice, and the pen could be pretty mighty here. So that's what we did. But I did it with a known author, which was great.
And so without going too much into it, but just talk to me, so what were the key lessons from this book? If somebody was to pick that up, what would they have taken away?
I think a lot of it, actually, I quote Abigail Adams in one of the first chapters. And when John Adams is, one of the people writing the Constitution, she says to John, remember the ladies. And we aren't in the Constitution of the United States of America. There is no amendment for women's rights. So we weren't remembered. So that was a very important point to get across. We still don't have rights in the Constitution. Men do, Black men do, but women do not. Yeah, we have the right to vote, but we don't have the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA, which we've been fighting for so many years. So writing that book was really important. And then we did a second book, which was Driving the Career Highway, which because men would read the other book maybe for their wives or their daughters, and they'd say, oh, this is really some great information. So we said, okay, maybe we should make this for men as well.
And so you wrote this book, clearly helping people, women and men, or anybody with their careers. At this point, were you working in financial services when you co-authored that book?
I was the spinoff from AMBAC, which was from Citibank that I was working at, yes.
And at this point, you were in the world of HR? Within
HR, marketing, and facilities. So I always used to say I was in charge of bathrooms, bonuses, and brochures. I had it all, right?
But as time went on, and obviously your career now in executive search and the impact you've had in the world is incredible. But I look back, what got you into the world of executive search?
Well, a little bit of it was the book.
Okay.
Because if I wanted to speak to women in the workplace, I needed to be outside of the workplace myself. And so what did I do well? I was known as the closer. I could close the deal of people getting great talent into a company. So I decided that executive search was probably the area for me. And that's in the year 2000, I left and went into the world of search and wanted to do it differently. I wanted to really focus on women and underrepresented groups and get more balance in boardrooms and in C-suites. And so level the playing field.
Do you ever, a lot of people that I might meet, people might think, oh gosh, wow, Janice is very brave, changing careers, going into unknown territory. Did you ever feel fear?
Fear, everybody has fear, but you have to confront your fears. And what's the worst that can happen, right? So you really have to go into the areas where you're uncomfortable, because I remember being uncomfortable in one of my roles. I was bored. And this was at a major corporation right after I left the medical center. And I don't like to be bored, right? And so the fear was, okay, where am I going to go next? I didn't know. But, sometimes God laughs, even though you make a plan and she laughs. I went to another company, Citibank, and that really appealed to me and my passion. And I think you have to be true to yourself. That's the other lesson I learned early in life, is being true to yourself. Don't try and believe you should be somebody else in somebody else's life or doing another path. Really being true to yourself. But yes, there's a fear in everybody. Yeah. There's no simple answer in life,
And on that fair point then, and being true to yourself is going to be a potential answer to this question, is, if people are listening now, whether that's women or any underrepresented talent or anybody who just lacks a bit of confidence, what would you say to them to kind of get that confidence boost if they're listening thinking, I wish I was more like Janice, I wish I had that confidence level, I just don't?
That's a really hard question, because I think confidence comes from age, actually. You feel much more confident later in life because you've gone through a lot of life's lessons. But you have to realize that people are people. Everybody's had to struggle. And, I love watching tennis, and Roger Federer, has said that, sometimes it's not about talent, it's about hard work. And everybody fails, but you have to pick yourself up and go at it again. And there's no superstar out there without a lot of practice. So, even when I'm dealing with candidates who are going to be interviewing for a C-suite position or in a boardroom, I'm really saying to them, you have to practice and you have to be able to communicate. Who are you? What are you bringing to that company? And be sure to land the plane, which is meaning, people sometimes just go on and on. They don't really articulate who they are. So it's gaining confidence by practicing with yourself and with advisors, people and trust, to give you feedback.
Love that. Land the plane, right?
Because land the plane.
I see it sometimes interviewing candidates, and it's on and on and on, but there's no substance, and that plane's never landing. Right. Now, as the years have gone on, Janice, Bloomberg Business Week, they heralded you as one of the world's most influential headhunters. What does it take to be a truly great headhunter in today's world?
May I say I'm not a headhunter?
Okay.
I do executive search.
We'll take Bloomberg's words and then stretch them.
Right.
What makes a successful individual in executive search?
I think you have to have been a connector all your life. So, I belong to associations. I was president of one at one point, professional associations. I think you have to be a real connector and know a lot of people starting at a very early age. I always say, in college, start that, or even earlier, and be able to assess who are the people that you're dealing with and be able to evaluate. But knowing a lot of people in life is really important when it comes to executive search, because you need to be able to tap those individuals for positions or for searches that you're going to be doing. And then to be able to evaluate candidates, that's important. And you can get to the sort of the nitty-gritty parts of a person by going through their life, a little bit of what you did with me earlier. But it's important to really know have a very wide network.
And okay, I just want to dig into this a little bit, because firstly, if you are interviewing a candidate, let's say, what are some of these, if I can say, killer questions that you would ask to really reveal and get to know a person?
Oh, I take them back to their childhood.
Really?
Yeah. I want to know, where you were raised, how you were raised, who were the people that influenced your life. And some of the people that really had some, silver spoon or not, just were out there and they had the grit to make things happen. But you get down to not the psychology as much about people, but just their behaviors through life, how they treated other people, which is really important. I did a podcast very recently with the CEO of IBM, Arvind Krishna, and he said when he's looking and evaluating people, he's looking for three things. One is intellectual curiosity, because that's a person that's going to be creative. They're going to be looking around the corners. They're going to be looking to see what else can I do differently. Second is grit. Beyond tenacity, it's that true grit to get in there and really persevere and stay with something or pivot and move on to something else. And the third, which I think is key, is followership. Because if people follow you, then you care about them, you communicate with them, you're committed to them, right? And they're going to follow you up that proverbial hill. So those are some of the things that I really am looking for in people.
And I hear this a lot about this word grit, really trying to find it. It's a tricky one, and also you mentioned
you have grit.
but to your point, it's come from sometimes a bit of hardship, right? Sure. That's given you no choice but to succeed, where things cannot get any lower, that you have to keep on going. But then again, for somebody who's maybe it's not their fault that they've had a really nice upbringing and no challenges, but they can still have grit. I guess that's your point. They can. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people who have been, do have that silver spoon, if you have an entitlement attitude, though, I'm not so sure that you're going to develop grit. Yeah. And you may stumble and you may not be able to pick yourself up. I think going through some adversity in life is absolutely essential, and everybody generally does, right?
It's funny. I was thinking the other day with my mum, that even though life goes through highs and lows, it's such a blessing that you get to feel that range of emotions. I know it's an interesting way of looking at it, but if you don't ever get to feel sadness or feeling anxious, what a beautiful thing that you get to feel such a spectrum. Even though those times are hard, they're the moments that teach you so much, right?
But that's why you need this network in your life. Now, I always think of it as like a bullseye, and in the middle are your people who really, really close to. Not all family. Sometimes it's family and friends that you're really, really close to, and you'll tell your innermost thoughts and secrets to. And they'll help you through that. And then you have others that are friends, good friends, and you'll ask advice on career advice or whatever. And then you have the other part of the circle of the bullseye where they're more acquaintances. And it goes out from there, right? And so in life, different people help you along the way. And so you have to be able to ask for that help. But it's not necessarily asking everybody. It's asking those you really trust, who are going to give you great feedback.
And I think on that asking for help, I find mentorship is so important. I'm not shy to ask somebody. It doesn't happen often. Once a year maybe, or twice a year. If you find somebody they're really inspiring, I ask, would you mind, supporting me or mentoring me? But a lot of people don't go out there and get mentors. What would you say to somebody who says, I think I'd like a mentor, I don't know much about them? How could they proactively seek out a mentor?
So I don't think they should just have mentors. I think they should have champions. And I think the way it happened for me in corporate America was if you're helping other people along the way, they're going to help you. If you give them credit for what they've done, they're going to give you credit. They are going to be your champions. And mentors could be people who, you're using for advice on how to handle a particular situation. Coaches do a great job with that. We have that in our firm. We have coaches who will help individuals as we place them, because we'll give 100 days of free coaching, really get assimilated into the organization. And that's very important to do that for the individual. But you're not going to necessarily have that person put their name on a piece of paper to get you that promotion or that job. That's the champion. That is the champion that you want in your life to say, Sally, you can do it. And I'm going to make sure that Bill knows that and you're going to get that promotion. You want those champions. And they need to know what you're about. So you need some visibility. And how do you get visibility? Is helping others along the way.
And just on the point of visibility here, something that comes up a lot these days with leaders is around their personal brand and their reputation. And I could put a room of 50 leaders in front of us and it will divide in two. Half of them will say, I know that my online presence and my branding is important. The other half who say, LinkedIn, online, I'm not interested.
Right.
What's your view on this, the importance of leaders having an online presence, personal brand? Does it matter?
I think for some it does. I think many, though, are out there in conferences and speaking or being quoted in the paper. Does Jamie Dimon have a LinkedIn presence? Probably not as much as some others. He doesn't need to, right? So it really depends upon what you're comfortable with and how well known you are.
Yeah, and I suppose Jamie Dimon's an example where everybody's promoting him, or I can't open Instagram these days without some of his bits and bobs popping up. But okay, now as the years went by, I know that you took over ownership of Ellig Group in 2017. Yep, tell us a little bit more about Ellig Group.
So it is a legacy company. The company was actually started in 1977 by a man and a woman, Bill Gould and Millie McCoy, who came from two big search firms. And they wanted to do search differently. And Susan Chaddock joined them in 1986. I joined them in 2000. After I joined, 2 years later, they retired, right? But the firm goes back nearly 50 years. And it's all about doing search differently. It's really focusing on the solution, not just filling a box. So we're really focused on what does the client need? And then seeking that talent that's going to be that solution for that specific client. And we'll never take on competing assignments. So if I'm being asked to do a CFO for a bank, I'm not going to do it for 3 banks. I'm going to do it just for that one, so that my clients really see the very best candidates that are out there.
And what you've done with your work, I know, is you've placed women, underrepresented backgrounds, people of minority ethnic backgrounds in these leadership positions, which is incredible because you've given them a voice and you've been their champion. And looking at champions, you also have your flagship event, which is the Breakfast of Corporate Champions. Tell us a little bit more. What's that about and why did it set up? So
the Breakfast of Corporate Champions, when I was in 2011, I was president of the Women's Forum of New York. And I said, if I'm going to run a search firm and I'm going to be president of this organization, we have to make a difference. So we said, let's fame, not shame, companies that were above the national average of the S&P 500. Now, in 2011, S&P 500 had 16.7% women on their boards. Helena Morrissey here in the UK was running the 30% club and trying to get the FTSE 100 to be at 30%. So I knew Helena, and I said, Helena, I'm going to do something like this in the States. We're going to start something called the Breakfast of Corporate Champions, and we're going to honor companies above that national average. So in 2011, we honored the companies at 20% or more when the average was 16.7%. And we've done that biennially, every 2 years. And so we're at like 33% now, but there's a little bit of slippage happening. So I think we've made a difference. I think it's been an impact, but we really had, iconic CEOs and from the Fortune 100 come and speak about the importance of having diversity, the importance of representing your employees, your customers, your communities, and your shareholders. Think about it. Half the world are women, right? So, and then you have the ethnicity as well. So we were really representing and honoring those. We were convening these wonderful leaders to talk about the need and why it makes a difference. And so for some like, Michael Worth, he's in oil and gas with Chevron. He said, we don't even think about, that we have a diverse board. We just find the best people. And half of them had been women and then people of color.
And what would you say to a company who says, or we can look on their website, we can see their board, it's not very diverse, and I see these quite often. What would you say to them if they say, especially, we can't find the talent? Because I hear that.
Well, if anybody is saying that today, you can't find the talent. I mean, maybe in 1920, you couldn't find the talent, but you can find it today. I think you're shortchanging the vision of the company. You're not representing all of your constituents, and you will not be the employer of choice, the product of choice, or service of choice, or the to buy your shares. And I think when we look at companies today, those that are more successful have a more diverse board and C-suite.
And I think in tandem with looking at, diversity and inclusion, I also, as you know, believe in a more human working world where leaders are more human in their approach. Yeah. Right. I'm guessing you've seen throughout your career or the organizations you've worked with and for those cultures where they really are human and cultures that are probably pretty toxic. They still exist today. But all too often, I find that there are leaders in senior positions. I call them toxic rock stars. They're great for billing. They drive the revenue. But they are like cancer for culture. Mm-hmm. But they remain in position. What would you say to their bosses or leaders at the helm of these companies who have these toxic rock stars? Because some of them are scared.
Oh, that's true. I mean, they're the big revenue producers. But I think the times have changed quite a bit. And I think that what, leaders and boards are saying is you can have some toxic environments, but not throughout the entire organization because you are not going to retain your people. So, look, I think that not everybody changes overnight and change can be slow, but we have a number of decades here that we can really change those dynamics. And for those companies that have already done it, the others are saying, well, if they've done it, we should be able to do it too. And now I think we're in a period, though, with DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, which is being, people are running a little scared about it in our country. And so they're pulling back on the title. And I think this will not go away immediately, but I think that companies are still, even though they change some of the wording in their policies, they're still going to want the results of having a more diverse workforce. So it's coming. It takes time. You just have to keep the pedal to the metal, as I say. So I want to make one thing perfectly clear. We do place Caucasian men into positions, but the focus has been to level the playing field, to make the landscape in corporate America more equal. But it's always the most outstanding person that you're placing. Yeah. And, when we talk about, well, is it just a diverse candidate that's going in there? No, we're doing this on merit. It just so happens that individual, if I have a slate of candidates, 10 or whatever, those individuals are going to be really strong. And so my clients are taking the women and the underrepresented as opposed to the Caucasian men, all things being equal.
Yeah. As you say, it's leveling the playing field, and then that's critical here. And throughout your career, and I suppose you've interviewed so many candidates, met so many people, you mentioned your network. Mm-hmm. I'm just intrigued. How do you deal with difficult people? I want to learn.
How do I deal with difficult candidates, you mean, or difficult clients?
Both.
Well, difficult clients are wonderful people that you just want to listen to them and then give them alternatives. And if they don't want those alternatives, then that's their decision to make, right? And if they're very difficult, I probably won't work with them again. With candidates, it's the same thing. If a candidate is difficult to work with in terms of even getting an appointment with them and the client, they're probably not the candidate of choice. So people are people, and they're going through different phases in their life. So you understand that. It's really listening to what's important in that person's life. But if they're a difficult person, they probably wouldn't be my candidate because they're probably not going to be collaborative enough in the organization.
It's interesting because I feel like, in life we come across people like that. And often, as you say, people who don't listen, people who don't give other people the respect, right. And it could be a real trigger. And I always ask that in interviews, actually, what is your number one trigger, that pet peeve that kind of really gets people going? As we look ahead at Ellig Group, the years ahead, what's your vision for the company?
Growing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. With other services as well, including our Board Academy Bootcamp, which we have, which trains individuals in the C-suite in terms of demystifying what it is to be on a board and how to get on a board. And it's a 6-month program.
Okay, so tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So it's I acquired this from Maggie Wilder-Otter, who's been on many, many boards in the U.S. And it's designed to really show an individual what is the work of the board? How does the board work? What are their responsibilities? Then how do you make yourself a compelling candidate? And then how are you a really effective board member? And so we bring in very seasoned board directors to facilitate the program. And we only take 25 people at a time. And they really get to know each other. And then we bring in somebody from private equity. How do you get noticed by the private equity world? And then we bring somebody in about your media image and how to present a more compelling image of yourself. So and then the people become buddies within there, and they really check on each other. They have a workbook in terms of, what are you going to do in week 6, in week 8? And then we follow up with them, and we have virtual, podcasts with them. So it's a 6-month, and people, they have to own their pathway to the boardroom. We can make some introductions. We can show them that their bio is really bad, how to redo the bio, but we show them their pathway and have them own that. Because you cannot get on a board unless you own it yourself and really, focused on and being very intentional. So every week you should be working on this.
And if people are interested in knowing more, where can they find out more? Is it on your website?
Yes, we have it's Board Academy Bootcamp on our website.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Check that out. And that's something that happens in New York, or it's virtual?
It happens in New York for a day and a half, and then it's virtual after that.
Okay, great. So anybody around the world could join that.
Right.
In New York, and then it's virtual.
It's usually a C-suite executive or somebody who's functionally really proficient in a particular area. Yeah.
And Janice, you've had 2 books. Do you think there's another one bubbling away for
Absolutely
the future?
Not. Too much work. No. I would prefer to write articles and do webinars and do what I do in terms of speaking with CEOs. And we're going to do the Breakfast of Corporate Champions again next year. So.
And another question, going back to the personal side then, when we look ahead at Janice's life, do you ever think about retirement, or do you always think there's always another goal, there's more work to be done? What's in Janice's mind for the future?
So a friend of mine, Jerry Sedler, wrote a book a very long time ago called Don't Retire, Rewire. Oh. And I will continue to rewire.
Love that.
It's just in my DNA. I don't really know how to unwire. I know I really enjoy what I do. It's not a 4-letter word. It's not work. It really is a passion. And so, yes, but I have a balanced life. So.
But I feel like a lot of people, if they can't relate to that, it's hard to understand, which is you love what you do. You get the buzz from what you do. You see the impact of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. To your point, it's not work. This is your purpose. And going back to your mum's first point, you love what you do and it's with purpose.
Yeah, and I'm running it. It is what I'm really responsible for running it. I have a fantastic team. I will say that will tell me when I'm wrong, which I love, and they will go a different direction. So I can pivot. But I really do believe people, and I look at this when I'm interviewing candidates, I really do believe people need to, what is their legacy going to be? Need to look at that. How do you want to be remembered? You can't go out of this life, put a check in your pocket, and it's not going to go anywhere, right? So how are you going to make an impact on the world? How have you helped others along the way be the best they can be? And I think that's really so important.
And talking about legacy and impact, I go back to your sisters. Do you still have your sisters today?
No. So the middle sister, the one I followed to the University of Iowa, passed away many years ago. She was quite young. She was in her 40s. And so I set up a scholarship in my sister's name. And then her name was Adrian. And so we call I started the scholarship in 1999. So it's, going on 26 years. Every year there's a scholarship in the master's program, public health at the University of Iowa. So it started in 1999. So I have now 25 going on 26 women, right? So every 5 years, I get them together because they have to be a network. They have to help each other. Most times I bring them to New York City. We go to plays and we go to museums and everything. This year I took them to Bozeman, Montana to sort of get into nature a little bit and kayaking and what have you. And these women are ages 21 to 46. 21 to 46. So the 21 and 22 and 23-year-old were not alive when I started the scholarship. And they learn from these older women, so the oldest being 46, 47. And every single one of them, married, divorced, children, whatever, have not left the field of public health. in some way, shape, or form. They're running hospitals, they're running diagnostic centers, they're running research institutes, everything in the area of public health. And when you think about it, a glass of water, if it's dirty, that's public health. Animals transmit, diseases to us. That's all public health, in the area of public health. And these are phenomenal women. I learned so much from them. So, I get them together. They know each other. We have a Zoom cocktail hours because they're all over the country.
Yeah. Wow. Special. And in your sister's memory.
And so my sister, so we call ourselves the A team. Yeah, it really is special. And the other sister, Elaine, is also very, very close. And but yeah. And those are the tragedies that we all have in life, but what are you going to do? You're going to carry on their legacy. So
that's that. Now, Janice, before we go into your superpower, because obviously it's my job to be getting to know you even more and thinking what is something that's special about you that we can all learn from. I've got something in my mind that's bubbling, but before I go there, I've just got a few quick fire questions for you if I can. And my quick fire questions are known for not being very quick.
I don't like to do this.
I know, which makes me want to do it more. So my first question is, if you were hosting a dinner party and you could invite 3 guests, those who are with us today or no longer with us, who would you invite and why?
Ooh, interesting. What immediately came to mind, Cleopatra, Mahatma Gandhi, and Maggie Thatcher.
Nice.
They're very different.
Very different. Okay. Right, where should we go next? Now, this is a big one. What's the best career decision you've ever made?
Oh, going into my own business. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, it's a clear
I would have
one.
done it earlier had I known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's been the proudest moment in your life?
Oh, interesting. I'll go back to the scholarship in my sister's name. I'm really so moved by what these women are doing in terms of impacting the world. Yeah.
I love that. And I think more than anything, like you mentioned, that started before some of them were even born. And now you've created this network, this sisterhood between them. Right. And finally, if I could give you a supply of one thing for the rest of your life, an unlimited supply, what would it be?
Great health.
It's the number one asset, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Janice, thank you for that. Now, I've been trying to work out your superpower because I've obviously got to know you over the last few years. And there's something that's always stood out for me about you above the rest, because you're always willing to take risks, but it's not without fear. Like you said, we all experience it. You're bold in your approach. You will often take the path that very few people will take. And this word for me, it's being daring. Because daring, and I was looking at a few words in advance of this, think, where might I go? It is somebody who is, again, bold in their approach, not afraid to take risks, will take the unconventional route. What does being daring mean to you in your life and your career?
I have a great support in my husband, okay? So, and my sisters and my family and friends in general. So I really always felt that I could pick myself back up, and again, I came not from money, and I just really worked very hard, and I connected with a lot of people along the way. So daring for me was, I wouldn't describe me that way. I think I do take sometimes the path, less taken, less worn. But I felt like I've always had that support around me. So it's not been, what's the worst that can happen, right? And again, to go back to Federer, at failure, everybody has failure. So pick yourself back up. And I know there's some very disadvantaged people. I'm very fortunate. I'm not in those situations. And that's why I think it's so important for people to give back, because we're so fortunate in life that we do have choices. And so if I have choices, being daring is like, okay, but somebody else, maybe living in Africa or living in, Ohio, people have had horrible situations in their life, from trafficking to to devastation of homes and what have you. I feel very fortunate of what I've had. So for me, Look, Helen Keller said, life is an adventure or nothing at all. And she was deaf and blind. So, yeah.
As they say, who dares wins. And I feel that
you have to live life.
You have lived life.
Yeah.
And, and I do find that in getting to know you, to you, it's probably considered, well, I would always do this, Gian. But to transition industry, to go set up your own business, to acquire a new company, to say, actually, let me reach out to Helena and look at what they've done in the UK, because I'm going to take on Wall Street and make a change over here. It takes a very special type of person, and that you've done that in your career. It's pretty phenomenal. But my final question, Janice, and you mentioned it yourself, is around the importance of legacy. What do you want Janice Ellig to be remembered for?
Yeah, that people will say, I changed their life. Yeah.
I think I can say you've had a huge impact on me over the last few years already. And yeah, making me emotional at the end there.
Me too.
We're both going. But you've changed so many lives. And I think you're a very humble individual. And I hope people who are watching this, they'll go land that plane, be more daring, be confident. And I'm sure you'll change their lives too. Thank you so much for being here.
Ian, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Your friendship, your support. Thank you.
A huge thank you to you, our listeners, for being part of our community by watching, subscribing, liking, and also leaving comments on all of our videos. It truly means so much to us, and it helps us to grow the show, making it possible for us to invite even more amazing guests for future seasons. And if there's someone you'd love to see on the show, do let us know. Your suggestions help us bring on incredible guests that you really want to hear from. Feel free to leave those in the comments or send a message directly to me on my social channels at Gian Power. We'd love to hear from you. Have you found the episodes? How have they made you feel? Have they inspired you, challenged you in any which way? Share your experience. We always love to hear your stories. And we've got some super exciting plans ahead. And with your support, we can take the SuperPower podcast to even greater heights. So if you're enjoying the show, please hit that follow button on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you're listening. And hey, if you're watching on board your in-flight entertainment, remember to follow us when you land. Or if you've got Wi-Fi in the sky, hit that follow or subscribe button now. For now, thank you once again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the SuperPower Podcast with me, Gian Power.